rallying for Rogan and the dumbest bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials, and the Millennial joining me today is, of course, Christopher Hopkins, our producer. Welcome, everyone, and welcome to Delegate Matt Morgan from the great state of Maryland. Again, thank you for being back here,
Always
Matt.
my pleasure, Mark. Always.
So this podcast is called Rallying for Rogan, and we have an incredibly dumbest bill in America. We even have a go woke or go broke. But first up, Tim Dillon, who's a comedian, folks. If you've ever listened to any comedian, and I'm sure that you have out there, because conservatives have a tendency of having a sense of humor. Democrats don't. Tim Dillon is hysterically funny. He doesn't hold back. He'll make fun of anybody. He'll make fun of the left. He'll make fun of the right. Rogan does that too. Well, Tim Dillon decided to rally around his good friend, Joe Rogan, both of whom are comedians. Joe Rogan obviously is the biggest podcaster in America. And Tim Dillon decided that on his podcast, he was going to, protect Joe Rogan. And we have a couple of clips on this. But before we play those, in the Daily Wire, a Boston Globe reporter asks comedian Tim Dillon, who is Joe Rogan's good friend, to give the Boston Globe reporter an interview about Joe Rogan, hoping that, of course, Tim Dillon would do what? Would make fun of his friend or try to cancel his good friend, because that's modern journalism today. And so here is what was tweeted to, and by the way, Tim Dillon tweeted this all back out and put it on his site, his website, and of course on his podcast. He says, so here's from the Boston Globe reporter, Mark Shanahan. Mark Shanahan says, "Hi, I'm a reporter at the Globe, and I'm working on a piece about who else? Joe Rogan. I know Tim is a pal, and I'm wondering if he might have a few minutes to talk about Joe and all that entails at the moment. Let me know. Thank you." So obviously, Mark Shanahan from the Boston Globe sent that because this was going to be a way of hitting Tim Dillon and Joe Rogan probably in the Globe. He sent it to, of course, Tim Dillon's manager, hoping that he could get to Tim Dillon. So Tim Dillon responds personally via tweet from Tim Dillon to the Boston Globe. "Hey, Mark. Joe was killed last year with most other celebrities and politicians. What you're seeing now is a body double. Trump and the military executed him along with many others for the crime of human trafficking. Biden is actually a body double, and Trump and the military are still running the government, thank God. This will all come to light in time. But yes, I'm available to discuss this and many other things." So, classic Tim Dillon. He just doesn't care. And so Dillon decided he was going to rally around Rogan on his podcast. And before we go to Matt, we want to play these two clips for you because they're hysterical. So Jen Psaki, of course, came out in the White House to set this up. And Jen Psaki said, "We need to do more to censor Joe Rogan." Okay, this is the president's spokesperson. We need to do more to censor Joe Rogan. We need to do more. What more is that? Well, obviously what they mean is cancel him. So Tim Dillon plays the clip of Jen Psaki and then comments on this. We have this first clip up, and here it is.
What a pale woman, very pale. It's uncomfortable when someone's that pale. You can see their veins. You can see the blood running through their veins or lack thereof. They want to do more. Well, what would be more, Jen? They've got a disclaimer for the adults. If you're a child and you somehow get on Spotify, should we put a child lock on the phone? There's already, they have that, right? Don't they have an app?
Yeah, sure.
They have an app protecting the children from Spotify. Because, the kids, they want to listen to Robert Malone for 3 hours. Young, impressionable teenagers, they want to listen to Robert Malone on Joe Rogan. So it's a real danger.
So that's right. So young, impressionable teenagers want to listen to Dr. Malone, who is on the Rogan podcast for 3 hours talking about the mRNA vaccine. And of course, Dillon's going, "Oh yeah, they're so damaged by that because of the fact that there's this free conversation and somehow there's misinformation given to teenagers who are going to watch a 3-hour podcast. There's no way." Right?
Well, they're just looking for an excuse to silence them. I mean, when did their feelings start getting so tender that they cared about what was said on the media? Because you think back like 10 or 20 years ago, Howard Stern. Can you imagine how these people would deal with Rush Limbaugh right now?
Oh my gosh. Well, they tried to cancel him for years by going after his advertisers, but this was like his advertisers, like later in life, they tried to do that, and then tried to get him unsyndicated because obviously, he was not on podcasts; he was on the old radio.
But Mark, I think this is the best thing that's happened to conservatives in a really long time, because I'm a big fan of like transparency and people knowing who you're actually dealing with. And they're using the power of the government through coercion to crack down on any dissenters and their friends in big tech. And look, what's coming out is alternative platforms. And look, I don't really listen to Joe Rogan that often. Maybe because he's a guy that's kind of on the left, but I think they're starting to sway him a little bit more.
I listen to him from time to time, and I enjoy it, by the way, because I'm not afraid, and I know you're not either.
Right.
But conservatives aren't afraid of hearing alternative viewpoints.
We're laughing about.
Yes, we're laughing about it. But one of the takeaways I have from this is Tim Dillon, the comedian, and Joe Rogan, as you said, they're on the left, and when you have progressives losing the cool crowd, right? Because this is now considered the cool crowd. 100 million people subscribe to his podcast. 12 million people listen a week. This is the cool crowd. Tim Dillon, his growth rate is going straight up like this of his podcast. And he, all of his shows are sold out across the country.
This is the same playbook they've used over and over again. And now they're going after him. And
the left, they're losing the cool crowd, right? Because they had Hollywood, but now Hollywood's considered to be like really stale. And you have the cool crowd on podcasts. They're actually being listened to. That is what makes them afraid. This is just my personal opinion, but it just shows you, if you lose the millennials, if you lose these alternative media type people, the progressives lose them there. I don't know when they win another election. I mean, I'm not really sure. So podcast listeners, Tim Dillon, you just heard him. He was commenting about Jen Psaki saying her face is so pale that you can see the veins in her face and the blood going through it.
You got to be careful of these night walkers. Suck the blood out of you.
She does look like she's acting in a
skin
vampire
is
movie.
Glistening.
It's like a vampire movie. And so we have the second clip of Tim Dillon just totally roasting the media and trying to cancel Joe Rogan. And Tim, of course, is rallying around his good friend Joe Rogan. Here is that clip.
Now, adults who are not responsible for their behavior anymore, they don't. If you're an adult now, whatever you do or don't do, vaxxed or unvaxxed, dead or alive, fat or thin, on fentanyl or not, whatever you're doing at any given moment of the day is no longer your responsibility. It's because some podcaster fucked you over. Some podcaster said something and you took it to heart, and now you made a choice that got you killed because you listen to a podcaster because that's where you get your information from. You're an adult in America. And you have to be protected from people that put on headphones and talk into a mic 2 or 3 times a week because they are your only sole source of information. And they'll get you killed. These podcasts are dangerous. They'll get you killed.
So the podcasters are going to kill you if you listen to them. So therefore, they must be shut down because you can't make your own decisions about what you watch and what you see and how you filter information and make an intelligent, critical thinking decision about what's best for you.
Well, the left has believed this for a while, that words are violence. And it's violence against people. And it's just so funny to hear these comedians that are on the left come out, like Bill Maher's another one, come out and just like ravage this because it's a ludicrous position.
Yeah, and Bill Maher, you're right, is the other comedian who is on the left who's coming out against the censorship. And he's also, of course, if you listen to Bill Maher's entire podcasts or if you listen to him on YouTube or you watch him on TV, same thing with Tim Dillon. And actually the same thing with Rogan too. What you're going to find out, podcast listeners, is these guys are not on our side. They're not conservatives, but you know what they are? They're actually the people that are the traditional liberals who are the critical thinkers and actually are willing to have the conversations And of course, that's what Joe Rogan said. I'm just having a conversation. Apparently I can't do that now in America.
Well, I mean, the traditional liberals, we actually had a lot in common with them as conservatives. They believe in freedom of speech. They have a healthy distrust of government and central power. And he believed in like being free.
Exactly.
And the one thing these guys are bringing to is humor. And like we've talked about before, the left has no patience for humor. They're miserable people that can't really laugh at themselves.
They can't
meme. They can't.
They would never laugh at Tim Dillon with those 2 clips there.
No.
They would never laugh at that. They would, oh my God, Joe Rogan's going to kill people.
We need to go after sponsors. We need to shut this guy down. Yes, he's violent.
It's very scary because people don't have the common sense to change the channel. If they're really afraid, they can't do that. So next up, podcast listeners, taking the mask off of CNN. Speaking of the left, of course, and taking themselves very seriously, CNN's Don Lemon last August, by the way, that was just 6 months ago, right? What's changed in 6 months? Not a whole lot when it comes to masks. He was totally in support of mask mandates, as was the entire network of CNN. So Don Lemon is on TV in his primetime program on CNN, just talking again and again about how masks are so important and we must follow the government diktats and so forth. We have a clip on this. We're going to discuss how CNN has evolved and how the left has evolved because now they're polling and finding out that it's not popular. First up, this happened 6 months ago with Don Lemon on CNN. Here is the clip.
The president today slammed governors who ban mask mandates in schools for their own ghoulish political good.
Some politicians are trying to turn public safety measures, that is, children wearing masks in school, into political disputes for their own political gain. Some are even trying to take power away from local educators by banning masks in schools. They're setting a dangerous tone. The intimidation and the threats we're seeing across the country are wrong. They're unacceptable. Now, I've said before, this isn't about politics. It's about keeping our children safe.
Shouldn't be about politics.
Yeah, so, no, it shouldn't be about politics. You should just obey. And then, of course, that was Biden back in August talking about how people were complaining to the school boards. They were complaining to their politicians, and therefore they're terrorists.
The moral combination of them is just like, going after people. Look, the mask has never really worked. They keep acting like the science has changed on this. And they've just been flat earthers for a really long time on this. I remember
even Johns Hopkins.
Yeah, taking one of these.
Hopkins.
And look, and this has been a real big problem with higher ed and people in the scientific community and stuff. We're kind of counting on them to tell us the truth. Mm-hmm. And they haven't followed the science. They followed the political science. All these guys back down and then all of a sudden they're getting a big grant to their institution.
Exactly.
And it just makes you wonder. And like people that were for 2 years, people like us have said, you know what? I wore the surgical mask when I was doing some drywall in my house. It didn't stop drywall. How's it going to stop COVID? Where's our apology?
Oh, of course. And then CNN, Don Lemon, of course, and CNN and MSNBC. But Don Lemon in particular on CNN, he, in this same conversation 6 months ago, then decides to attack Governor DeSantis because DeSantis never put in a mask mandate. It was up to you if you wanted to wear a mask. So now fast forward, of course, we know that all of this is BS. It should never have happened. It should always have been an option. But in the meantime, 6 months ago, because we're giving, by the way, podcast listeners, we're giving this history because we're leading up to some other modern clips to show you how the Democrat Party has come full circle because they're terrified because it's an election year. Well, here's Don Lemon from 6 months ago hitting Governor DeSantis about masks because he's not a good guy. Here's that clip.
The president is right. Some governors are putting their own political gain ahead of children's lives, really of their constituents' lives. Like Texas Governor Greg Abbott, who issued an executive order banning school districts from requiring masks and tested positive for COVID-19 the day after he attended this crowded indoor Republican club meeting, apparently not wearing a mask. And then there is Ron DeSantis. You can always count on him to try to turn a deadly disease into an applause line.
Politicians want to force you to cover your face as a way for them to cover their own asses. That's just the truth. They want to be able to say they're taking this on and they're doing this, even though it's not proven to be effective. They want to continue to do it.
God, that is just such bunk, or just to say this is bullshit.
Don Lemon, like saying this is BS on a major so-called news network to the viewers.
But he was wrong.
And he's wrong.
He's wrong.
Yes, fast forward, he's wrong.
Yeah, when the policies they're pushing fail to produce the results they're promising, they never come out and say, you know what, we're wrong on this. No, they come out and demonize you and call you stupid. Look, the Democrats are doing a full-blown reverse on this. I'm thinking like a week from now, they're going to be like, we've always been against masks.
Yeah, we're following the science now.
We're following the science now, and the science changed.
Yeah.
The science hasn't changed at all.
Yes, this is the New Testament that we're following. The Old Testament, we got rid of that, you know? We got rid of that
they're going to
completely.
come out and say, you know what, we've always been against masks. And nobody other than the podcasters and the comedians, nobody will call them out on this because, you know, you have a bunch of corrupt media that's nothing more than Democratic operatives running
100%.
around,
yes,
holding
completely.
their hands, won't hold these people accountable.
Exactly.
You need to hold Democrats accountable for the results of their policies. If Republicans did that, we would never lose another election.
Will people remember in November that what they did to them for like
2 years.
2 years with masks to their children, literally destroying their children's lives? I mean, it's just ridiculous.
I hope so.
I'm not necessarily sure they will,
Yeah,
but
I'm not confident.
we're going to do our part to make sure they remember, of course. So the CNN CCP statist, yes, CNN has a Chinese Communist Party statist that is always talking about mask mandates. And in the Daily Wire, a CNN medical expert says it's time to lift the mask mandates to preserve medical authority. Oh, wait a minute. You just heard the clips from Don Lemon from 6 months ago. But now, today, this week, CNN's like, yeah, we need to lift the mask mandates. So this is Dr. Leana Wen, of course, who, when she calls on people and audiences, she's like, yes, you may talk now. That's, you know, you can talk. I mean, it's just really creepy. I'm sorry. This woman is totally creepy. So CNN, they're so bought and paid for by the CCP. Well, Wolf Blitzer, one of the anchors of CNN, he must be 150 years old by now, I'm sure. He talked to the CCP resident doctor at CNN. And this is from this week, podcast listeners. The takeaway should be how CNN has evolved suddenly. But listen to the language she uses. Here is the clip.
You say we can start removing at least some coronavirus restrictions. Now, tell us why.
Well, I agree with Colorado, with many other local and state jurisdictions that are beginning to lift government mandates. And I think this is the key. I'm not saying that we should be stopping masking, but rather that this needs to shift from a government requirement to an individual decision. The government can't keep on telling our citizens that this is a 5-alarm fire all the time. People are just going to start tuning it out and not pay attention. They'll be desensitized. And so what needs to happen is we need to end the state of emergency and preserve the ability of public health authorities to reinstitute mandates in the future if we see more dangerous variants later.
Go ahead, Matt.
It sounds like you got a supporter, Mark. You know, like the science didn't change at all. The political science changed on this.
Absolutely. The polling has changed. CNN in 6 months, right? The science hasn't changed, but suddenly they're looking at the polling. And of course, they're getting their instructions from the White House and the Democrat Party. So now, hey, tell all the people in the country now, we need to get rid of the mask. It's safe. And meanwhile, I was just outside in downtown Annapolis, podcast listeners, this morning, okay, on my way to get a cup of coffee. I go outside and there's I guess she's maybe in her 20s. She was driving. She parks. Parallel parks her car, gets out of her car. She had a mask on, alone in the car, and she was maybe 25 years old. Maybe 25. And, you know, I was so close to saying, what do you think's going to happen? What is going to happen?
We should have brought her in and interviewed her.
And this is what they're doing. This is what you're right.
Because, I mean, I'm kind of interested too. I mean, like that age group's not really at risk, but you know what? If she wants to wear a mask, that's fine. That is her option. I support it. When did they when did they flip on this opinion that they actually giving people a choice?
Oh,
I'm like,
well, she said,
thank you, comrade.
She is a comrade, the CCP doctor. on CNN because she's like, well, we can't have a 5-alarm fire all the time. We have to preserve the mandates so that we can come back to them like right before the election. She didn't say the last part, right before the election, but that's kind of what I'm reading in between the lines. Don't you?
Oh, yeah, that's absolutely what's going on. Their polling has switched on this. People are done after 2 years of just being lied to. And honestly, I had a phone call with a constituent earlier this week. I said, look, I'm just going to have to come up with new conspiracy theories because all the ones I previously had have come true.
Exactly. and you'd be really careful because we might get canceled, because they're trying to cancel Rogan too. Although we, of course, don't have 100 million listeners, at least not yet, right, Chris?
Not yet.
Yeah, we're getting there. So,
well, I'll tell you, if they gave us that $25 million contract per year, was it $100 million from Rumble?
Oh my gosh, I know. And we talked about this yesterday.
There's a bunch of college people out there like, man, maybe this podcast deal, I don't have to agree with my professor on everything.
That would be by the way, that would be a cool podcast, by the way, like a bunch of students who ridiculed all of the woke professors on their podcast. Of course, they'd fail out of college.
Like a college wrap up.
Yes, exactly. And then like take clips from the classroom because that's all, there's no reason why you can't record what's going on in the classroom. Many people do because that's how they can refer back to it, of course, rather than having to take notes or both. So why not do that? It's actually a pretty good idea, but as again, if once the professors found that out, they would totally like fail them in the course and they'd be expelled. So,
but they would keep talking and it would be incredibly entertaining.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you want to be like almost like a man in the street type deal.
And we do have a story about that coming up, by the way, podcast listeners, in our Go Woke or Go Broke. But in the meantime, CNN saying, of course, first through Don Lemon 6 months ago, keep the masks on. Governor DeSantis, everything he says is BS. Literally, he said that on the air. Then the CCP statist at CNN, the doctor of the House, is like, well, we should get rid of the mandates for now, but preserve the right to have mandates soon to come back. Now, here's just this week, Jen Psaki on mask mandates. She clearly, for whatever reason, hasn't gotten the messages. We're going to talk about this in a minute, Matt. I'm not really sure I understand why she's doing this. We have that clip. Here it is.
Back on the mask mandate question in New Jersey and other states, the CDC is still recommending universal masking in schools.
That's correct, and that still remains our recommendation.
So are you pleased with and fine with the New Jersey governor's decision?
Again, our advice to every school district is to abide by public health guidelines. It continues to be at this point that the CDC is advising that masks can delay, reduce transmission. There are also a number of other mitigation measures that we've put in place, but that continues to be CDC guidance. It's always been up to local school districts to determine how they implement.
What does it say then that a governor like Phil Murphy, who's been so closely aligned with the policies of this administration, would get ahead of the medical experts and say, never mind what they say, school districts, you decide?
Well, it's always been up to school districts. That's always been our point of view and always been our policy from here. And our policy from the federal government is to continue to advise everybody to abide by public health guidelines.
Do you think it signals that perhaps the public believes it's time for a change in the federal guidelines, the CDC's guidelines?
Well, we certainly understand and have seen in polling that the public is tired of COVID. We understand that. So are we. And there has been some good signs recently where there has been a decrease in hospitalizations around the country. And again, we're in constant touch about what it looks like moving forward. But our responsibility as the federal government is to rely on the data and the science that is being analyzed by our public health experts, and we'll continue to rely on that for what recommendations we're making.
Matt, what do you think about the evolution?
Well, they're polling. He got the polling before they had a chance to share the polling with the CDC.
That's right.
That's what happened on this.
That's exactly right. So get this, just exactly what you said in the Daily Caller. This is breaking news podcast listeners. New York Representative Maloney, he's a congressman, says government is ready to give their lives back, give the people their lives back. New York Democrat Representative Sean
we must thank him for that.
Yes. New York Democrat Representative Sean Patrick Maloney praised Democrats on Wednesday for essentially ending the pandemic, announcing it was time to give people their lives back. The Democrats, by the way, apparently are ending the pandemic. They've ended the pandemic. It hasn't ended on its own. They've ended it.
Congratulations to them. I mean, this entire time we've been talking about case numbers and infectious rates. What the hell's changed?
Nothing has changed.
Nothing's changed. The science has been the same. They are just.
So this is what they're going to run
side
on.
to side. Oh yeah,
They're going to run on. We ended the pandemic. The Democrat Party ended the pandemic.
It's just like the same thing as when you see like you argue with some of the people on the left are like, Joe Biden's created all these jobs. It's like,
he created jobs. He's been in government his whole life. He's created all these jobs as the president of the United States.
Yeah. So, well, no, the country reopened.
Delaware is such a worker's paradise. Have you ever been through Delaware?
But it's so funny that to say that New York, New Jersey, Delaware, all these people are like, yeah, you're taking too damn long.
In Delaware, you need a mask mandate just to drive through the cities because they smell so bad.
I mean, I thought the CDC was like, that was like taking advice from the Pope. I like we can't CDCs. We're trusting all the elected officials for the last 2 years. Like, well, I'm not making the decision. We're going to let the scientists and the doctors make the decision. and now they're like, they haven't changed at all. What changed?
Nothing's changed except, as you said, it's the polling. But the CDC hasn't gotten the polling. But in the meantime, of course, the Democrats are going to literally run on this idea that we ended the pandemic. You see, you don't have to wear masks anymore because we ended it. And therefore, they're hoping the polling goes right back up. So watch for that, podcast listeners. And that's taking the mask off of CNN and the Democrat Party. Next up, we have Go Woke or Go Broke. George Washington University becomes Chi-Com University. In the Washington Examiner, George Washington University parroted Chinese propaganda because students cried racism. The president of George Washington University has walked back his condemnation of posters critical of the Chinese Communist Party. But his instinct to lash out at the activists responsible for the posters the moment students cried racism is a failure of leadership and an indictment of the current state of higher education. University president Mark Wrighton initially claimed that he was personally offended by the posters he now admits he knew nothing about. He promised to have the offensive posters removed as soon as possible and said that he too was saddened by this terrible event. The posters in question, podcast listeners, listen to this, were made by Chinese artists Bao Duquao, I probably mispronounced that, who used Olympic imagery to call attention to China's human rights abuses, including its genocide of the Uyghurs and oppression of the Tibetans. Simply looking at the posters would be enough to determine that they are not racist, as students alleged. Apparently, even glancing at them before making his initial statement was too much for the president of George Washington University. But here's the rub. The posters were reported as being racist by members of the George Washington University Chinese Students and Scholars Program. The so-called CSSA works in tandem with the Chinese Communist Party to monitor Chinese students at universities overseas who might spread Chinese propaganda, a fact that has been documented by the New York Times and Human Rights Watch. So GW's president is going full Chi-Com. And that's my alma mater.
That's your alma mater.
That's where I went. Yes.
Well, GW's had problems for years. And I just think this speaks to the overall problems that we have our universities across the country. Right now, they're sympathizing with communists.
Well, this is the university president.
Yeah.
Who just like someone.
That's a job qualification right now for a university president. You have to swear allegiance to the Communist Party. And I'm wondering, do they, before football games, what national anthem do they play?
Well, GW doesn't have a football team. But they do have a basketball team.
They do have a basketball team.
Yeah, it's good.
A couple of years ago, I remember GW removed all their stadium seating because they're, it used to be, I think, blue and yellow.
Right.
But those are white supremacy colors.
They are?
Yeah, apparently. I mean, that reminded people of the...
Since when?
That reminded people of the revolution. So they had some donor came in and replaced all their stadium seating. I think they're black now, just black seats.
That's just ridiculous. So this Chi-Com president of GWU, so he basically didn't even see these posters which were supporting the Tibetans, right? an occupied territory by the CCP, and the Uyghurs, who were, of course, being persecuted, jailed, tortured, organs harvested, and God knows what else by the CCP. And so this artist put these pictures up to actually highlight minorities and to support minorities. And the dumb ass president of George Washington University, and I rarely curse on this program, by the way, but I have to because I went there. And I know how these presidents are there. They don't care what the facts are. As soon as they hear that word racism, they're so terrified of losing their job. But there's something else here too. GW is truly an international university, and they make a lot of money from these students that come from mainland China. And obviously because they're paying the full boat. It's a private university anyway, so everybody pays the full boat unless you have an actual scholarship. But nonetheless, that's what he's doing. He's measuring. This is the problem.
So let me get this straight. The university president is so afraid of being called a racist that he supports an area that has slavery?
Yes, he does. Yes, he supports slavery, apparently. But you know what's interesting is you're right, Matt, because he wouldn't even speak out in favor of after realizing he made a mistake.
He wouldn't even speak out against slavery.
Correct.
Yeah.
He wouldn't affirmatively say what's happening in China is wrong, because then the CCP would then say, well, no one can go to GWU now. Nobody can go there from mainland China.
Honestly, it sounds like this guy maybe got half of a transgender surgery because he's lost some body parts.
And then this kind of reminds me of this American skier, this Victoria's Secret model who grew up here in the USA. And I think she has one parent who is, Caucasian, another parent who is from China. And she decided to identify, which I guess that's the new thing, right? Used to identify as a different gender. Now you can identify as a different nationality.
Oh, yeah.
So she's identifying as communist and basically said, I don't want to have anything to do with the United States. I'm going to get rid of my citizenship, which of course is an idiot. What an idiot. And then she gets there and she loses. She falls while she's skating. It's so stupid, right? And so then they start making fun of her on the various chat apps in China. Like, what a loser. She really stinks. And, she shouldn't be allowed to come back. I'm sorry.
If you're announced her citizenship, she should be trying to, come across the southern border like the other 2 million people that Biden let through. Because, look, if you don't want to be part of this country, and apparently a lot of people want to be part of this country, rich, poor, everybody has in common, they want to come here.
Yes.
Because it is the best. And
there are probably 500 million mainland Chinese people who absolutely despise the CCP and would love to come to the United States of America. But obviously that would destroy our environment.
I would say that there's more people in China that want to be American citizens than actually Americans here.
I'm sure you're right.
Their entire country is 1.3 to 1.6 billion.
Exactly.
We got 330 million here. Our whole country is a rounding error for them. So I'm sure there would be, we could double our population if we wanted to.
Oh, easily. Without question. So I just think this is really interesting stuff. When you have a president of a university that decides that he's going to become a Chi-Com university, and that's go woke or go broke. Next up, podcast listeners, an interesting story about Swinging Stan. Yes, Swinging Stan. That's exactly what you think, by the way. And it's a Republican. So one of the things I'm proud about in the Market of Millennials, we make fun of everybody, okay? If you're an idiot politician, we're going to make fun of you. If you have a stupid bill, we're going to make fun of you. We don't care what party you're from. So Swinging Stan, GOP gubernatorial candidate Stan Pulliam, he's running for governor, reveals he was a swinger, part of Swingers' Facebook group. It's the one group Facebook hasn't canceled,
So there's a Swingers Facebook group?
There's apparently a Swingers Facebook group.
So you can't have a trucker convoy, but you can have a Swinger Facebook group?
Well, they can have a GoFundMe too.
Is he still a member? Or
it's GoFundMeSwingers.com, but you can't have a GoFundMe for the Freedom Convoy. That's what it's called. So Republican candidate in Oregon, gubernatorial race. So he's in Oregon, right? He's a Republican candidate for governor, recently raised a few eyebrows after a 2016 screenshot from Swinger Facebook group PDX. What does the PDX stand for? I wonder. Doesn't say. A Facebook group for swingers in the Portland area, I guess P is Portland, area started making its way around Oregon political circles. The snaps, 4 in total, showed active Sandy, Oregon mayor, so he's currently a mayor of Sandy, Oregon, Stan Pulliam and his wife, Mackenzie, and included a note from the politician. Quote, "Hi, everyone," the message began. "Mackenzie and I are excited to be added to your little community. Some of you have already had the pleasure to meet, and we look forward to getting to know the rest of you." At the time, the swingers group had 536 members. Speaking to the Oregonian, Pulliam confirmed he was previously involved in a swingers group meant for those who enjoy swapping sexual partners, but insisted it was a private matter between he and his wife. Well, apparently not. It's a Facebook group. It's not that private. He told the publication he and Mackenzie explored mutual relationships in the past, but have since decided to focus solely on each other, our marriage, and our family. So now he's running for governor and he's a family guy. The pair share 2 daughters, Lucy and Olivia. Quote, "Ever since day in and day out, we've worked as a team to strengthen our family and to create a better community and state for our girls and the hundreds of thousands of kids just like them so they can safely grow up, live, work, and stay right here in Oregon," Pulliam said. So then he has a picture of his campaign picture. It's like he and his daughters. It's in here somewhere. And it's like one of those, photos on his website about how, like, here it is, Stan Pulliam for governor. And they're all sitting around the kitchen table. And he and his wife were just like such family people, Matt, Stan Pulliam represents as the mayor of a small town in Oregon. Think this will fly in Oregon?
It's Oregon, probably. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that must make for some exciting PTA meetings with the wife.
Yeah. Well, he says to the group that he signed up for, "I'm looking forward to getting to know the rest of you." I mean, it's like in a swingers group, when you say that, I mean, it's pretty straightforward, right?
But
there's getting to know you, and then there's getting to know you.
So he's gone this far. There's more information coming out, right? There'll be a videotape series behind this.
Oh, for sure.
And other people will come, I remember that guy.
Well, according to his campaign website, Pulliam considers himself to be a proud pro-life, to a pro-medical freedom, and pro-private property rights conservative.
At least he got something going for him.
Quote, Pulliam says, "As governor, I will always protect your constitutional right to make personal decisions." Controversially, Pulliam previously campaigned as an ally to former President Donald Trump, routinely backing Trump's erroneous claims the 2020 presidential election was rigged. So this guy obviously is quite the tool. And
I'm just wondering, you read stories like that and it just doesn't jive. I mean, you wonder if it's just an opportunist type thing.
Oh, I think this is quite real because he was caught on this Facebook. It's not like he acknowledged it up front when he ran for governor. Someone like, "Hey, dude, is that like you on this Facebook group, the swingers group in Oregon?"
Well, Ronald Reagan said we always wanted to get the government out of your wallet and out of your bedroom. So, I mean, everybody needs a hobby, I guess.
According to the Willamette Week, Pulliam has raised $1 million in his race for governor. Multiple polls have him currently ranked number 2 in the race.
And actual polls, not like where'd you dance from?
The poll must have been of the 536 people in that group.
Yeah.
His wife's number 1. The conservative politician has expressed he has zero intention of dropping out of the race after the news of him previously being a swinger was brought to light.
I mean, I'll tell you what,
oh my God.
What is he running for, governor?
He's running for governor.
I mean, can you imagine the parties at the governor's mansion?
Yes. I mean, well, no, actually I can't, but yeah, I can probably picture it. I'm not part of his group.
Chicka bow bow.
That's right. By invitation only.
By invitation only.
Yes. Mr. and Mrs. Pulliam would like to invite you to the, okay, yes. And that's Swingin' Stan. Next
Republican
up,
Party. The Republican
and he's a
Party.
Republican, swing and stand. Yes, that's swing and stand. Next up, podcast listeners, we have the dumbest bill in America. And do we have a lead up, Mr. Producer? Here it is.
Dum 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 dum.
And it's the dumbest bill in America, and it is house arrest for illegals. House arrest in the United States for illegals. In the New York Post, new Biden program aims to put migrants under house arrest instead of detention. I didn't even know they were being detained because it looked like to me like they were just crossing the border and running. The Biden administration wants to put hundreds of illegals, by the way, they're using migrants, not true, illegals under house arrest in a test program aimed at slashing costs amid soaring numbers of crossings. The home curfew pilot program in Baltimore and Houston would include between 100 and 200 single adults at each location. By the way, we're the other 3 million that crossed into the country, according to a U.S.
This
immigration.
is a trial program.
Yeah, it's a trial program.
They're only going to test it on the first couple hundred.
Of course not. No masks required. According to a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement memo seen by Reuters as the administration tries to move away from the use of for-profit detention centers. So they're calling this home curfew. So you got to kind of like stay at home if you're an illegal being placed in these two cities of Baltimore and Houston, Matt, and then you have to stay home between 8 p.m. and 8 a.m., but then allowed to go to work. How are they allowed to go to work? How are they allowed to work?
I don't know how they're allowed to work. I mean, I thought this is something the parties, prior to Trump being elected, kind of agreed on that the problem with illegal immigration is it takes a job away from another American. I don't know how in the world they're allowed to work, but they're freely admitting that they can go to work. This whole program's not adding up because you're watching like hundreds of thousands of people run across the border, but somehow these 100 or 200 are lucky enough to get ankle bracelets.
Yes, right.
I mean, it's almost like the Biden administration is now the largest human trafficker of potential criminals.
Yes. So we got a couple million people. So that's really what we have to talk about right now, podcast listeners, because a couple million people across the border probably since Biden.
Well, they said they arrested 1.9 million. So,
yes.
I mean, it's way over 2 million for the people that didn't get arrested.
But there were only 100 to 200 people in this program in Baltimore and Houston.
And they're single males.
Yes. So are they actually, you're right, Matt, are they actually criminals that are being basically surveyed or, surveilled, by the Homeland Security people and the police because we didn't deport them? They're actually criminals. We're actually letting them stay.
Obviously we want these people to feel like productive members of society. So you have to put them in places where they would relate. And if you're a criminal, Baltimore's a pretty good place.
That's a perfect place to be. Yeah, it's like they need new gang members because they're shot every day.
I mean, we are losing population in the city of Baltimore, and replacing them with more criminals. I mean, would make perfect sense. I mean, it is the murder capital of the country. And
by this podcast, sister, as I said, they've broken the laws. They've obviously broken the law by crossing the country. That's why we're calling them illegals. But I'm talking about they've committed some sort of crime in their home country. And there's a record of that. We know it. We find out about it by I'm talking about the federal government and Homeland Security. And we're like, we're going to put you in home detention. And of all places, Baltimore and Houston. I'm sorry, but if you're a black and you live in Baltimore, you're a law-abiding citizen, you now have criminals in your midst because they sure as heck didn't put them anywhere else. What they should have done is just send them back home.
Look, but this is another policy. It's amazing to me that only about a year ago, I mean, Trump had really reduced the number of illegal crossings and the border problem. I mean, Joe Biden inherited a secure border. And now it's just all the problems that the society faces by these illegal crossings.
And making these really dangerous cities worse.
Dangerous cities worse. And look, they have to be accountable for their policies at the end of the day.
It's just, and by the way, podcast listeners, this is really important, right? We're talking about the dumbest bill in America. And here is kind of a nuance of the dumbest bill in America. Your federal government, we the people and Congress has ceded so much authority to the administrative state that the administrative state of the presidency and, of course, Homeland Security and other agencies are literally making law without Congress. And this law, which is house arrest for illegals in Baltimore and Houston, okay? House arrest for illegals in Baltimore. No congressman passed this law. This wasn't voted on. This power was ceded to the administrative state. And that's one of the reasons why I support Convention of States, because Convention of States wants to pull back that power to Congress, to the United States House of Representatives, to the Senate, and so that they can actually vote on these things, because you know as well as I do, Matt, they would never be able to vote on this because there would be hearings on it and there would be brought to light the fact that these probably are criminals.
Well, the policy would be
that they're putting in these
reversed.
cities.
Yeah, I mean, the policy would be reversed. This is governance through executive order. And look, and like we mentioned Baltimore City, the state of Maryland, their entire congressional delegation are Democrats with the exception of one member. And look,
they're not speaking up.
You never hear them talk about this.
Oh, no, of course not.
So
Is the mayor of Baltimore speaking up?
No, hell no. I mean, it's a party governed by, it's a city governed by one party.
Is the
only.
governor of Maryland speaking up? I haven't heard anything.
I haven't heard from him.
So officials claim that the program would cost between $6 to $8 per enrollee instead of the $142 a day cost at bustling detention centers. Here's what I find just like totally weird. Where are these detention centers? Remember kids in cages and people in cages during Trump? Where are these detention centers? Because all I see on the media are people running across the border, fleeing, getting into the interior of the country. I don't see them being detained.
Well, they pulled away a lot of the for-profit, or what they said was for-profit jailing. I don't know where these detention centers are. To me, they're just, this is, you've heard Ron DeSantis speak out about this, where it's like, we're tired of
he's going to send them to Delaware, to Rehoboth Beach.
Send them to Delaware, send them to Martha's Vineyard.
Martha's Vineyard. Martha's. So in Reuters newspaper, U.S. tries house arrest for immigrants as alternative to detention for immigrants. They're not immigrants. See, this is the English language is very precise. And the Democrat media is literally lying. These are illegal immigrants, all right, at a minimum. But no, they're saying immigrants. The Biden administration will place hundreds of migrants, and we're reading this article too, just to give you a full flavor of what the media is saying. Immigrants caught at the U.S.-Mexico border on house arrest in coming weeks as it seeks cheaper alternatives to immigration detention, according to a notice to lawmakers and a U.S. Department of Homeland Security official, which are literally, by the way, podcast listeners, making law without Congress. A 120-day pilot program will be launched in Houston and Baltimore with 100 to 200 single adults. Yeah.
How were they lucky enough to get selected?
Yes, exactly. What were the qualifications? And it goes on to say somewhat of the same stuff that, they actually are being paid. Of course, Scott, you have a welfare state, this really generous welfare state in the United States of America. You wonder why people are coming across the border. I know they come across the border for many reasons, but the principal reason now, I am convinced, especially when you look at the southern border, is the incredibly generous welfare state that we have right now. And I'm not saying that there aren't people that cross the border illegally that really, truly want a better life, because I do believe that is part of it. But I think increasingly, the millions of people, tens of millions of people that are already in the United States illegally are just calling home going, hey, guess what? I got a check from the federal government and I'm not even a citizen and I'm not even working and I've got all this welfare. I'm making $40,000 a year by sitting on the couch.
So we just got finished talking about China and how many people would come here if they could. Now think about it from a world perspective. There's 7 billion people in the world. I would say 50%, 40%, something like that would probably come here if they could.
Yeah, and we would have no place to live.
And at that point, you wouldn't have a country.
We would have ruined our environment. There would be no order whatsoever because these individuals would not share the American experience. They would not, and of course, Democrats don't share the American experience either because they think we're terrible.
They know this. Why the policy reversal?
I don't even understand that. And the thing is, and Matt, you actually brought up the best point in this particular dumbest bill in America, and that is, why did this 100 to 200 people get chosen to be put in these two very dangerous cities? And and they're in house arrest. And the only possible answer that can come forward is the fact that they were criminals in their home countries. That's the only possible reason.
But we're letting them work.
Yes.
I mean, they're only under house arrest from 8 to 8, right?
Right, 8 p.m. to 8 a.m.
Yeah. But they're out to work.
But 8:01, they can go out and get a job.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how is that? How does that work as well? You just like
It gives you great confidence in the Biden administration.
Exactly. And that's the last word of Mark and the Millennials, and that's the dumbest bill in America. Thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our producer, Christopher Hopkins. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Getter, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.